The warship came down from the sky like a dark cloud. It was huge and gray, and it made a sound like thunder as it landed on the green fields of New Bizan. The colonists stopped their work and looked up. They had seen coalition ships before, but never one this big. Never one that landed with so many soldiers. Commander Thrall stood at the front of his troops. He was a Corvani, a reptile-like creature with green scales and yellow eyes. His soldiers stood behind him in perfect lines. There were 50 of them, all carrying plasma rifles. Their armor was black and shiny, and their faces showed no emotion. "The signal came from that direction," said one of his officers, pointing toward the eastern plains. A small farmhouse. 3 Vashri life signs detected. Thrall's eyes narrowed. Vashri. The word alone was enough to make most species run in fear. The Vashri were the most dangerous predators in the galaxy. They looked like wolves, but they were bigger, stronger, and smarter. Their claws could cut through metal. Their teeth could crush bone. And they healed from wounds that would kill any other creature. Centuries ago, the Vashri had destroyed 12 star systems. They had killed billions. The Galactic Coalition had spent 100 years hunting them down, burning their worlds and killing every last one they could find. Now, only a few hundred remained, hiding in the dark corners of the galaxy dot, and 3 of them were here, on a human colony world, near a farmhouse. "Move out," Thrall commanded. "Kill on sight." The soldiers marched across the fields. The wheat bent under their boots. The sky was blue and clear, and somewhere in the distance, birds were singing. It was a peaceful morning on New Bizan. The peace would not last. The farmhouse was small and simple. It had white walls and a red roof. There was a garden in the front with flowers of many colors. A wooden fence surrounded the property, and behind the house, there was a small barn. It looked like 100 other farmhouses on the colony. There was nothing special about it, but the scanners did not lie. 3 Vashri were inside. Thrall raised his fist, and his soldiers stopped. They spread out around the house, forming a circle. Their weapons were ready. Their fingers were on the triggers. "Attention, humans," Thrall called out, his voice loud and cold. "You are harboring illegal biological entities. Come out now with your hands visible. Any resistance will be met with lethal force." For a long moment, nothing happened. The wind blew gently. The flowers swayed. Then the front door opened and an old woman stepped out. She was short and thin, with gray hair tied back in a simple bun. Her face was wrinkled, but her eyes were sharp and clear. She wore a plain brown dress and held a wooden cane in her right hand. She did not look afraid. "Good morning," she said calmly. "I am Bong Soon. This is my home. What is the meaning of this?" Thrall looked at her with disgust. Humans were strange creatures. They were soft and weak, yet they spread across the galaxy like a disease. They colonized planets that other species had abandoned. They made friends with creatures that should be killed. They had no sense of proper order. "We have detected 3 Vashri life signs inside your home," Thrall said. "Step aside. We will handle this." Bong Soon did not move. Handle what, exactly? "The Vashri must be eliminated. This is coalition law." "They are cubs," Bong Soon said. "They are children." Thrall laughed, and it was a cold, ugly sound. "Children? Vashri cubs grow into Vashri adults. They are monsters from birth. Now step aside, or you will be arrested for obstruction." Bong Soon still did not move. She looked at the soldiers surrounding her home, at their weapons and their armor. Then she looked back at Thrall with steady eyes. "I think," she said slowly, "you should see something first." She turned and walked back into the house. Thrall hesitated for a moment, then followed. His officers came with him. Their weapons raised. The inside of the house was warm and simple. There was a kitchen with pots hanging from the ceiling. There was a living room with old furniture and books on the shelves. There were paintings on the walls, mostly of flowers and mountains. It smelled like tea and fresh bread dot, and in the corner of the living room, near the window, there was a girl. She was young, maybe 12 years old. She had black hair that fell to her shoulders and dark eyes that looked up at the soldiers without fear. She was sitting on a soft rug, and in her hands was a book with colorful pictures. But that was not what made Thrall stop Dot at her feet. Lying calmly on the rug were 3 Vashri cubs. They were each about the size of a large dog, with silver fur and amber eyes. Their claws, even at this young age, were long and sharp. Their teeth, visible when they yawned, were like small knives. They were dangerous creatures, born to kill, but they were not killing. They were not even moving. One of them had its head resting on the girl's leg. Another was curled up beside her, its eyes half closed. The third was looking at the soldiers, but it did not growl or bare its teeth. It simply watched, calm and quiet. The soldiers raised their weapons. Their training told them to fire. Every instinct screamed that these creatures were a threat. But something held them back. The cubs did not react. They did not run. They did not attack. They did not even seem to care about the guns pointed at their heads. Instead, the one resting on the girl's leg made a soft sound, almost like a purr. And the girl, this small human child, gently stroked its fur and continued reading from her book. "These are Palmy, Tani, and Maru," she said, her voice soft and calm. "They like stories. This one is their favorite. It is about a brave knight who saves a dragon instead of killing it." Thrall stared. In his 300 years of service, he had never seen anything like this. Vashri did not purr. They did not sit calmly. They did not let anyone touch them. "What is this?" he whispered. "What have you done to them?" The girl looked up at him with innocent eyes. "I did not do anything," she said. "I just loved them." Thrall felt something cold run down his spine. He had come here expecting a fight, expecting blood and death. He had expected the Vashri to attack, to prove once again that they were monsters. But here they sat, peaceful and calm, at the feet of a human child. And for the first time in his long life, Commander Thrall did not know what to do. The soldiers kept their weapons raised. Their hands were shaking. They had been trained to fight the Vashri, to kill them before they could kill you. But no one had trained them for this. No one had told them what to do when the monsters sat quietly like sleeping puppies. Commander Thrall finally found his voice. "This changes nothing," he said, though his voice was not as strong as before. "These creatures must be destroyed. It is the law. Step away from them, child." The girl, whose name was Park Yuna, did not move. She kept her hand on Palmy's head, gently stroking the silver fur. The cub's eyes were closed and it was making that strange purring sound. "No," Yuna said simply. Thrall's yellow eyes flashed with anger. "You do not have a choice. These are Vashri. Do you know what the Vashri have done? They have killed billions. They have destroyed entire worlds. They are the most dangerous creatures in the galaxy. They are my friends," Yuna said. "They would never hurt anyone. They are killers. They are cubs." Thrall raised his plasma rifle and pointed it at Maru, the largest of the 3 cubs. His finger touched the trigger. One shot would end this. One shot, and the danger would begin to disappear. But before he could fire, the old woman stepped in front of him. Bong Soon, the grandmother, stood between the weapon and the cubs. She was small and thin, and she had no armor, no protection. But her eyes were hard as stone. "You will listen to me first," she said. "You will hear the truth. Then you can decide what kind of creature you want to be." Thrall wanted to push her aside. He wanted to complete his mission and leave this strange planet. But something in the old woman's voice made him pause. It was the voice of someone who had seen many things, who knew many secrets. "Speak," he said, "but speak quickly." Bong Soon nodded. She walked to a chair and sat down slowly, her old bones creaking. Then she began to tell her story. "I was a xenobiologist," she said. "For 40 years, I studied alien species for the Coalition Science Division. I learned about their bodies, their minds, their behavior. I wrote papers and books. I was considered one of the best in my field." Thrall said nothing. He had not known this. The woman had seemed like a simple farmer. 20 years ago, I retired," Bong Soon continued. "I came here, to New Bizen, to live a quiet life with my granddaughter. Her parents died when she was very young, so I raised her myself. We built this farm. We grew vegetables. We lived in peace." She paused and looked at the cubs. They were watching her with their amber eyes, as if they understood every word. 6 months ago, something fell from the sky. It crashed in the field behind our barn. Yuna and I went to see what it was. Yuna looked down at her cubs, her face soft with memory. "It was a ship," she said quietly. "A small ship, all broken and burned." Bong Soon nodded. It was a Vashri escape pod. The Coalition had been hunting them, as they always do. A mother Vashri had fled with her 3 cubs. She was trying to find somewhere safe, but her ship was damaged. She crashed here. Thrall's grip on his weapon tightened. "And you did not report this?" "Listen first," Bong Soon said sharply. "When we opened the pod, we found them. The mother was dying. Her wounds were too deep. She had been shot many times. She was using the last of her strength to protect her children." The old woman's voice became softer. "I have studied many species. I have seen many creatures die, but I have never seen anything like the look in that mother's eyes. She was not a monster. She was a parent, doing everything she could to save her babies." Yuna's eyes were wet with tears now. "She looked at me," the girl said. "She looked right at me, and then she pushed her cubs toward me. She pushed them into my arms." The room was silent. Even the soldiers had stopped moving. "The mother died a few minutes later," Bong Soon said. "We buried her in the field, under the big tree. Yuna wanted to mark the grave, so we put flowers there. We still bring fresh flowers every week." Thrall shook his head. "This is a touching story, but it does not change what they are. Vashri cannot be tamed. They cannot be controlled. They are killers by nature." "That," Bong Soon said firmly, "is where you are wrong." She stood up and walked to where Yuna sat with the cubs. She knelt down, slowly and carefully, and looked at Maru. The big cub looked back at her with calm eyes. "In all my years of study," Bong Soon said, "I learned one important thing about the Vashri. Something the Coalition never understood. Something you never bothered to discover." She reached out and touched Maru's head. The cub leaned into her hand, just like a cat asking to be petted. "The Vashri are empaths," Bong Soon said. "They feel what others feel. They mirror the emotions of those around them. When you approach them with fear and hate, they feel fear and hate. When you point weapons at them, they become weapons themselves." She looked up at Thrall, her old eyes burning with truth. "But when you approach them with love, they become loving. When you treat them with kindness, they become kind. The Vashri are not monsters, Commander. They are mirrors. They show you exactly what you bring to them." Thrall was silent. He looked at the cubs, at their peaceful faces, at the way they curled around the little girl. He thought about all the Vashri he had killed over the years. He remembered their fury, their violence, their rage, but he also remembered the fear in their eyes. The same fear that his soldiers felt. "This is impossible," he said, but his voice had lost its certainty. "It is possible," Bong Soon replied. And it is happening right in front of you. Yuna did not approach these cubs with weapons. She approached them with open arms. She fed them when they were hungry. She sang to them when they were scared. She held them when they cried for their mother. Yuna hugged Komi close, and the cub made a happy sound. "They are not monsters," she said. "They are just scared and lonely, like everyone else." Thrall stood there for a long time. His soldiers waited behind him, their weapons still raised. The cub sat at Yuna's feet, calm and quiet. Finally, Thrall lowered his rifle. "Just a little. Just enough. I must report this to my superiors," he said. "They will decide what to do." Bong Soon nodded slowly. "Then report it. Tell them the truth. Tell them that a human child has done what the entire Galactic Coalition could not." She made peace with the Vashri. Thrall turned and walked toward the door. But before he left, he looked back one more time. Yuna was reading from her book again, her voice soft and gentle. The cubs listened, their ears moving with every word. And Commander Thrall, who had killed 100 Vashri in his lifetime, felt something he had not felt in many years. He felt doubt. 3 days passed. Commander Thrall's message reached the Coalition High Command, and the response came quickly. It was not the response he expected. "Destroy the creatures immediately," the order said. "Capture the humans for questioning." This is not a request. Thrall stood outside the farmhouse again. His soldiers had never left. They had surrounded the property day and night, watching, waiting. The colonists of New Bazan had started to gather nearby, watching the soldiers with angry eyes. Word had spread quickly. Everyone knew about the little girl and her strange pets. "Commander," one of his officers said, "the people are getting restless. Some of them have weapons." Thrall looked at the growing crowd. There were farmers with old rifles, workers with tools that could be used as clubs, women and children standing behind them, their faces filled with fear and anger. These humans were not soldiers. They had no training, no armor, no real weapons. If it came to a fight, Thrall's troops would win easily. But that was not the problem. The problem was that they were willing to fight at all. "Hold your positions," Thrall ordered. "No one fires unless I give the command." He walked toward the farmhouse door, but before he could reach it, a vehicle came speeding across the fields. It was a military transport, painted in the colors of the Human Colonial Defense Force. It stopped near the crowd, and a man stepped out. He was tall and strong, with short black hair and a face that looked like it was carved from stone. He wore a captain's uniform, and there was a pistol at his belt. His name was Kang Do-hyun, and he was the human military liaison for New BUSAN. Behind him came a squad of colonial militia. They were not as well armed as the coalition soldiers, but they moved with purpose. They spread out and took positions between the farmhouse and Thrall's troops. Do-hyun walked straight up to Commander Thrall. Their eyes met, and neither one looked away. "Commander," Do-hyun said, his voice calm but hard, "I am told you have orders to kill 3 children and arrest 2 civilians." "They are not children," Thrall replied. "They are Vashri. They are 6 months old. They drink milk and cry when they are scared. In my culture, we call that children." Thrall's scales seemed to darken with anger. "Your culture is not relevant here. Coalition law is clear. All Vashri must be eliminated. And human law is also clear," Do-hyun said. "Any sentient being on human soil has the right to a fair hearing before execution. You cannot simply kill them. They are not sentient. They are beasts. They are living creatures under the protection of this colony. If you want to take them, you will have to go through us." The air grew thick with tension. The coalition soldiers gripped their weapons tighter. The human militia did the same. The colonists in the crowd held their breath. This was the moment where everything could fall apart. One wrong move, one nervous trigger finger, and blood would flow. But then, another vehicle arrived. This one was larger, fancier, with the official seal of the colonial government on its side. When it stopped, a woman stepped out. She was middle-aged, with short gray hair and glasses. She wore a formal suit, and she carried a datapad in her hands. Her name was Han Jisoo, and she was the governor of New Bizin. "Everyone stand down," she commanded, her voice cutting through the tension like a knife. "That is an order." Both sides hesitated. No one moved. Jisoo walked between the two groups without fear. She stopped in front of Commander Threll and held up her datapad. "I have just sent a formal request to the Galactic Tribunal," she said. "Under Article 7 of the Human Coalition Treaty, I am invoking the right to a hearing for the 3 Vashri cubs currently residing in this colony." Threll's eyes narrowed. Article 7 applies to sentient beings. The Vashri are classified as non-sentient predators. Then the hearing will determine their status. Until that determination is made, you cannot touch them. This is a delay tactic. The Coalition will not accept it. "The Coalition signed the treaty," Jisoo replied smoothly. "If they break it now, they break every agreement they have with humanity. All 73 colonies, all trade deals, all military partnerships. Do you really think your superiors want that?" Thrall was silent. He knew she was right. The Coalition needed humanity. Humans were everywhere now, spreading across the galaxy, trading with everyone, building alliances. They were not the strongest species, but they were the most connected. Breaking the treaty would cost the Coalition dearly. But before Thrall could respond, there was a sound from inside the farmhouse. It was a sound that made everyone freeze. The door opened, and Eunice stepped outside. Behind her came the 3 cubs, walking calmly at her side. They moved slowly, carefully, their amber eyes watching the soldiers. "Yuna, go back inside," Bong Soon called from the doorway. "It is not safe." But Yuna kept walking. She stopped in the middle of the space between the two groups, surrounded by guns and anger. The cubs sat down around her, forming a protective circle. Then Maru, the largest cub, did something impossible. He stood up on his back legs, raising himself to his full height. He was already tall for his age, almost reaching Yuna's shoulder. His amber eyes swept across the soldiers, across the crowd, across everyone watching, and then he spoke. The sound was rough and broken, like rocks grinding together. The words were unclear at first, hard to understand. But slowly, painfully, they became recognizable. She is home. The silence that followed was complete. No one breathed. No one moved. Captain Dongyun stared with wide eyes. Governor Jisoo dropped her datapad. Even Commander Threll, who had seen many strange things in his long life, stood frozen in shock. The Vashri did not speak. They had never spoken. In all the centuries of war, in all the countless battles, not a single Vashri had ever used words, but no one had ever tried to teach them. Maru lowered himself, backed down and pressed his head against Yuna's leg. The girl put her hand on his fur, gentle and loving. "I taught him," she said quietly. "It took a long time, but he wanted to learn." They all did. Thrall found his voice, though it was barely a whisper. "Impossible." "Not impossible," Bong Soon said, stepping out of the house. Her old eyes were bright with triumph. "Just never attempted. You were so busy killing them that you never stopped to listen." Governor Jisoo picked up her datapad. Her hands were shaking, but her voice was steady. "I think," she said slowly, "that the tribunal will find this very interesting indeed." Commander Thrall looked at the cub who had spoken, at the girl who had taught him, at the humans who stood ready to die for creatures they barely understood, and He realized that everything he thought he knew about the Vashri might be wrong. Everything he thought he knew about humans might be wrong too. The news spread across the galaxy like fire. A Vashri had spoken. For the first time in history, one of the most feared creatures in existence had used words. And it had learned those words from a human child. Every news channel showed the video. It was recorded by one of the colonists on their personal device, shaky and unclear, but the message was unmistakable. The silver cub rising on its back legs. The rough, grinding voice. She is home. Some species watched in wonder. Others watched in fear. And some, particularly those who had lost loved ones to the Vashri long ago, watched in anger. 3 weeks later, the Galactic Tribunal convened on the space station called Central Point. It was a massive structure floating in neutral space, far from any planet. Here, the great powers of the galaxy came to settle their disputes. Here, laws were made and broken. The tribunal chamber was enormous, built to hold thousands. Giant screens floated in the air, showing the proceedings to billions of viewers across the galaxy. The judges sat on a raised platform at the center. 12 beings from 12 different species. They were old and wise, chosen for their fairness and their knowledge of the law. The prosecution team represented the coalition. They brought mountains of evidence, records of Vashri attacks, death counts from destroyed colonies, footage of the creatures tearing through soldiers like paper. They argued that the Vashri were too dangerous to be allowed to live. The cubs might seem peaceful now, but they would grow. They would become killers, just like their ancestors. The evidence is clear, said the lead prosecutor. A tall insect-like creature called Vin. The Vashri have killed 4.7 billion sentient beings over the past 3 centuries. They have destroyed entire civilizations. They are a threat to every species in the galaxy. These cubs must be eliminated before they can cause more harm. The defense team was smaller, but determined. Governor Han Jisu led the argument, supported by Captain Kan Do-yoon and Madame Bong-soon. They brought their own evidence, recordings of the cubs playing with village children, videos of Maru learning new words, reports from doctors who had examined the cubs and found them healthy and non-aggressive. But their most powerful witness was not a politician or a scientist. It was a young woman named Yoon Hannah. Hannah was a xenolinguist, a person who studied alien languages. She was only 25 years old, but she was already considered a genius in her field. For the past 2 months, she had been living at the farmhouse, working with the cubs in secret, documenting everything. When she took the stand, she spoke with calm confidence. The Vashri are not animals, she said. They have a complex system of communication that we never understood because we never tried to learn it. Their growls and barks are not random sounds. They are words. They have grammar. They have meaning. She showed recordings of her work with the cubs. In one video, Tanny was learning to count, touching objects with her paw as Hannah said the numbers. In another, Palmy was looking at pictures and naming them. Tree, bird, sun, friend. In just 2 months, Hannah continued, these cubs have learned over 300 words in Galactic Common. They can form simple sentences. They can express emotions. They can ask questions. They are not just repeating sounds. They are thinking. They are learning. They are people. The prosecution laughed. People? They are beasts with big teeth. A clever dog can learn tricks too. That does not make it a person. A clever dog cannot ask why, Hannah replied. Last week, Morrow asked me why the sky is blue. He wanted to understand. He was curious. That is not a trick. That is intelligence. The tribunal continued for days. Experts from both sides presented their arguments. Scientists debated the definition of sentience. Politicians discussed the dangers and possibilities. The galaxy watched and waited. Then, on the fifth day, the defense called their final witness. Park Yuna. She walked into the tribunal chamber alone. She was small against the massive space, surrounded by giant screens and thousands of watching eyes. She wore a simple white dress, and her black hair was tied back with a ribbon. She looked like what she was, a 12-year-old girl, far from home, standing in the center of the galaxy's attention. The judges looked down at her with curiosity. The prosecutor looked at her with contempt. The audience held their breath. "State your name for the record," said the chief judge. A wise old creature with silver fur and gentle eyes. "My name is Park Yuna," she said. Her voice was small, but it did not shake. "You are the human who raised the Vashri cubs?" "Yes, tell us about them." Yuna was quiet for a moment, gathering her thoughts. Then she began to speak. "When I first found them, they were scared. Their mother had just died. They did not understand what was happening. They cried all night, every night for weeks. I held them and sang to them until they fell asleep." She paused, her eyes distant with memory. Pomi was the smallest. "He was always cold, so I made him a blanket from an old sweater. He still sleeps with it every night. When there is thunder, he hides under my bed because he is afraid of the loud noise. I sit with him and tell him that the thunder cannot hurt him." A few beings in the audience shifted uncomfortably. This was not what they expected to hear about a deadly predator. "Tani is the curious one," Yuna continued. "She likes to explore everything. She once chased a butterfly for an entire hour. When it flew away, she was so sad that she would not eat her dinner. She just sat at the window, watching the sky." Even the prosecutor was listening now, his contempt replaced by something else. "Maru is the oldest and the bravest. He always protects his sisters. When strangers come to the house, he stands in front of them, making himself look big. But when we are alone, he is gentle. He lets me braid ribbons into his fur. He learned to say thank you because I said it to him every time he did something kind." Yuna looked up at the judges, her dark eyes clear and honest. "I know what everyone says about the Vashri. I know about the wars and the deaths. I have read the history. But Pomi, Tani, and Maru did not do those things. They are just cubs. They are just children." Her voice grew stronger. "They are scared of loud noises. They like stories about brave knights. They get excited when I bring them treats. They cry when they are hurt. They laugh when they are happy." She spread her hands, a gesture of simple truth. "They are not monsters. They are my family, and I will not let anyone hurt them." The chamber was silent. The judges looked at each other. The prosecutor had no questions. What could he ask this child that would undo what she had said? The chief judge leaned forward, his old eyes soft with something that might have been understanding. "Thank you, Park Yuna," he said. "You may step down." Yuna nodded and walked out of the chamber. She did not look back. She had said everything she needed to say, and somewhere across the galaxy, billions of beings watched a little human girl defend 3 alien creatures with nothing but the truth, and many of them wondered if, perhaps, they had been wrong about the Vashri all along. The verdict came on a gray morning, while rain fell softly on New Bizin. Yuna sat in the living room with her grandmother, watching the news broadcast on their old screen. The cubs were with her, as always, pressed close to her sides. They could feel her fear, her hope, her anxiety. They made soft sounds trying to comfort her. The chief judge appeared on screen, his silver fur glowing under the lights of the tribunal chamber. "After careful consideration of all evidence presented," he said, his voice slow and formal, "this tribunal has reached a decision." Yuna held her breath. Maru pressed his head against her shoulder. The 3 Vashri cubs known as Pomi, Tani, and Maru are hereby granted provisional sentient status. They are to be recognized as thinking, feeling beings with the right to life and protection under galactic law. Yuna let out a cry of joy. Bong Soon closed her eyes and whispered a prayer of thanks. The cubs, sensing the sudden wave of happiness, jumped up and began running in circles, barking and playing. But the judge was not finished. However, he continued, the cubs must remain under human guardianship until they reach full maturity. They will be monitored by a team of scientists and xenolinguists. Regular reports must be submitted to this tribunal. If at any time the cubs show signs of dangerous behavior, this ruling may be reviewed. It was not a complete victory. There were conditions and rules and watchful eyes. But it was enough. The cubs would live. They would grow. They would have a chance. Across the galaxy, the reactions were mixed. Some species celebrated, calling it a new beginning for interspecies understanding. Others were furious, calling it a betrayal of all those who had died fighting the Vashri. Commander Thrall resigned from his position in the coalition military, unable to accept a ruling he believed was foolish and dangerous. But time moved on, as it always does. The years passed, and the cubs grew. Dr. Yunhana established the first Vashri language institute on New Bizen. Scientists came from across the galaxy to study with her, to learn about Vashri communication, to understand these creatures who had been feared for so long. Hana published papers and books, changing the way the galaxy thought about the VA Shri. Madame Bong Soon's research became famous. Her old work on alien behavior was read by students everywhere. Colleges invited her to speak, and she traveled the stars, sharing her knowledge. But she always came home to the farmhouse, to her granddaughter and the 3 creatures she had helped save. Captain Kang Do-hin was promoted again and again. He became an admiral, commanding the growing fleet of the Human Vashri Alliance. Yes, there was an alliance now. Other Vashri, hearing the story of Yuna and her cubs, began to seek out human colonies. They came not to fight, but to surrender, to ask for the same chance that Pomi, Tani, and Maru had received. It was not easy. There were misunderstandings, conflicts, and fears on both sides. Some Vashri could not let go of their anger. Some humans could not forget their fear. But slowly, carefully, trust began to grow. And Yuna? She grew up too. The little girl who had held dying cubs in her arms became a young woman with fierce eyes and a gentle heart. She studied diplomacy and xenoculture. She learned to speak not just the language of the Vashri, but many other languages too. She became known across the galaxy as the human who had changed everything. On the day of her 25th birthday, she received an invitation that no human had ever received before. The remaining Vashri, those who had survived the centuries of war, asked her to come to their homeworld. They asked her to be their voice, their connection to the rest of the galaxy. They asked her to be their ambassador. The ceremony was held on the steps of the Galactic Council, with representatives from every major species watching. Yuna stood at the podium, wearing formal robes of white and silver. Behind her stood 3 massive figures. Pomi, Tani, and Maru were fully grown now. They towered over the humans around them, their silver fur thick and beautiful, their amber eyes bright with intelligence. Their claws were long and sharp, their teeth like swords. They looked exactly like the monsters from the old stories, but they were not monsters. They were her family. The crowd watched in silence as Maru stepped forward. He was the largest of the 3, nearly twice the height of a human, with scars on his fur from battles he had fought protecting his colony. When he spoke, his voice was deep and clear, no longer rough and broken. Years of practice had made him fluent. Centuries ago, he said, his words echoing across the chamber, your ancestors came to my ancestors with weapons and fire. They came with hate in their hearts and fear in their eyes. And my ancestors, feeling that hate, that fear, became what you expected them to be. They became monsters. He paused, letting his words sink in. Then one small human girl came to us. She had no weapons. She had no armor. She had only open hands and a gentle voice. She saw us not as monsters, but as children. She asked nothing from us. She gave everything to us. He looked at Yuna, and his amber eyes were soft with love. She gave us food when we were hungry. She gave us warmth when we were cold. She gave us words when we had none. She gave us a home when we had nothing. He turned back to the crowd, to the thousands of faces watching from every corner of the galaxy. This is why humanity will inherit the stars. The chamber was completely silent. Not because they are stronger than other species. Not because they are smarter. Not because they have better weapons or faster ships. Maru raised his head high. They will inherit the stars because they are the only species brave enough to love what terrifies them. They are the only ones who look at a monster and see a friend. They are the only ones who offer peace when war would be easier. He stepped back, taking his place behind Yuna once more. We are Vashri. We were your enemies. Now we choose to be your allies. And we make this choice because one human child showed us that there is another way. Yuna stepped forward then, her eyes bright with tears she refused to let fall. The old war is over, she said. Today, we begin something new. Today, we begin to build a galaxy where no child of any species has to be afraid. She extended her hand toward the Galactic Council. Will you build it with us? One by one, the representatives rose. One by one, they began to applaud. The sound grew and grew, echoing through the chamber, echoing across the star's dot and in the farmhouse on New Bizen. Old Bong Soon watched on her small screen, tears streaming down her wrinkled face. Beside her, a new litter of Vashri cubs slept peacefully, waiting for the children of the colony to come play with them. The old woman smiled. She had seen many wonders in her long life. But the greatest wonder of all was the simplest one. Love could tame anything, even monsters, even fear, even the galaxy itself.